I'm super excited to be talking about student engagement. It's one of my favorite things to talk about, and partly because it is so hard to get today. And I think it's harder than it has ever been in as long as I can remember. And I've been teaching for probably 30 years now. But when you've got it, it's kind of magical. So there's that. Here is how you can get in touch with me. It's all my socials. Pick one if you want to connect with me after this talk. There's my email as well. I would love to connect and I would love to hear back from you if you use anything from this talk, and especially if it goes well. I would really love to hear about that. So another thing I'll say is that I am happy to share the PowerPoint with you, so don't feel like you have to take notes on everything. If Stacy will remind me, I will be happy to shoot that over to share it with you. Okay, a few details about our session. We're going to talk about a few things. Our guiding questions are: what is student engagement? Why is it important? And how can we promote it? I will talk about specific teaching techniques in this talk. And when I do that, I will probably say them a little bit too fast. If you would like more information about them, you are welcome to check out kpcrossacademy.org. That has information about the specific teaching techniques that I will be talking about. So I might say something like, oh, you can use a jigsaw, or you can use a think, pair, share, or something like that. This is where you can find more details about that. Okay, so let's get started. I wanted to give you a little bit of background or context about how I became interested, fixated on student engagement. And I think it all started when I was a very new instructor. And in the early days, I was not in a full-time teaching job. I was what you call a windshield warrior, which means I spent a lot of time driving between campuses, teaching a lot of part-time courses, serving as an adjunct and a TA, and in various roles. I taught at a whole lot of different types of institutions, and I was an English instructor at the time. And over the course of I think it was 4.5 years. I taught 40 sections of introductory English. So there was a lot of teaching going on in this period. I commonly taught two different kinds of courses. Some of them focused on reading. So we would read and then we would write about the reading. And that was developmental reading and English composition 101. Some of them were really more about just the writing, kind of the without the reading. We'd focus on topical issues at the time, like gun control, or abortion, or some of those things that some of it we wouldn't focus on today, but we were focused on it then. So we'd pick a topic and students would write about it. So in the reading courses, in the writing courses, the one thing that those courses had in common was that they were about thinking, really, at their very heart. We wanted students to spend time thinking. Now, in the reading ones, we read fabulous, fabulous authors. We read people like Faulkner and Eliot and Shakespeare and Angelou and Langston Hughes and Flannery O'Connor. We read people who were so famous they had their own stamps. I mean, they were really great writers. And students came into class and they were excited and they were happy to be there and to talk about these readings, and they really resonated with them. Then there were the more writing-centered courses, without the reading, more topical-centered courses. And students were a little less happy to be there on the whole. They sort of looked at me a little skeptically, like, what are we even doing? And students in both classes had stuff to say to me, and they were not shy about it. In the reading focused courses, they would say things like, oh, I really enjoyed that reading. That was really fun and exciting, and I thought it was great. They would also say the reading really made me think, it really, I hadn't thought about this issue before. That was a new way to look at it. And, it really prompted something. And they would say something sometimes that the readings actually empowered them. And I'm not just making this up, they really did, that it touched them somewhere emotionally, and that it empowered them to do new things and go out and make a difference in the world. The writing focus courses, the students didn't respond quite the same way. A lot of times they would spend time telling me why they didn't need that course. They would say things like, I don't test well, so I was put in this course by mistake. I really shouldn't be here. They would also say, I learned how to write in high school. I had a fabulous teacher. She taught me everything I know, so I really don't need you or this course right now. Or my favorite one was, I'm going to be a whatever, so I really don't need to learn how to write. I'm going to be a doctor, so I'm not going to need to learn how to write. Or I'm going to be an engineer, so I don't need to learn how to write. I'm going into business, I don't need to learn how to write. My favorite, I'm going to be a lawyer, I don't need to know how to write. A little strange there. But something was going on with the way students were reacting in these two different courses. And maybe it was just me, maybe I was somehow driving it. Maybe it was the content, like I perceived that it was. Maybe it was just different students and different times of day or something. And it was, just a coincidence that it seemed to be sorting out this way. But one thing I was starting to get clear on was that there was a difference in the level of student engagement that I was getting, right? So in the writing courses, they lacked it. And in the reading courses, they had it, right? Teaching was different in it. When I taught the writing courses, it was hard. It was people who I felt like I was really having to work. I had to exert all the energy and effort, and it felt like they were kind of just pulling off of whatever energy I had at the course. But in the reading courses, it was easy and fun. I would just show up and practically say, "Hey, go." Yeah, good country people, go. And the students would take it from there. And it was very different. So learning was also different. In the writing courses, students didn't seem happy to be there. They were reluctant. In the reading focus courses, they were happy and excited and ready to learn. So this was my experience. And like I said, it might not have been the difference between reading and writing focus courses. It could have been me and my response to them. It could have been time of day. It could have been, I don't know, condition of the room that we're in. But what I did know is that some of my students were engaged and some were not. And I didn't have any language at the time to articulate this. I just knew, some students were with it and some were not. So I'm going to ask you, and I'd like to ask you to write your response in a chat so I actually get to hear from you. I want to ask you to pick one of these prompts and start to write a response, but don't click send yet. So you can either choose when my students are engaged, they do what, or you can pick when my students are not engaged, they, and complete the sentence. Don't hit go yet. I'm going to ask you to go, and I'll ask you for one first and then the other. So we'll do kind of what's called the waterfall. You've probably heard of it, but it's a waterfall response. So I'm going to give you just a second to write out the responses. I'm going to time it. So I don't know, 30 seconds or so. Okay, let's do, if you responded to the prompt about when they're not engaged, I would like you to hit go now. All right, there we go. They zone out, Kaylin says, do other thing in class, hop on their phones, chat with others, do online shopping, don't participate 100%. That is what they are doing when they're not engaged. They are off there. Stacy says they seem to misunderstand the concepts. Absolutely. Magdalena says when they're not engaged, they don't consume the content I put out. Yes. Julie, they have side conversations. Absolutely. MD says they look bored. Yes. And then they're yawning. Absolutely. So, absolutely, you can. Now, I will caveat this with saying you can almost see it. You can't always tell by that, but if your whole class is zoned out, shopping, yawning, looking the other way, then they're probably not engaged. If you have one or two people, there can be, it may not be a sign of engagement. It may be something going on with them. They may just be tired, or they may not make eye contact, or some of those things. So you got to be careful, but you can watch for an overall sense of it, right? Okay. So, Carrie, I think you got excited there. We haven't hit go yet, but everybody who said when they are engaged, let's hit go now. Yay. So Carrie says they ask a lot of follow-up questions. That is a good sign. They speak knowledgeably about the material. Yes, and answer the questions. They keep going, so you have to cut off discussion. Oh man, you're living the life there, David. That's a dream. So yeah, good stuff. Not engage? Carrie, wait. I don't know. Oh, I don't know. They ask a lot. Oh, they do ask. I thought they ask follow-up questions when they are engaged. Maybe I can see what you're saying though. They didn't pay attention, so they're having to ask you to repeat what you said. So that's probably going. Glowing face, yes. They have motivating why propelling them. Oh, I love that. Matthew. And then they ask about things. Okay, that's right. Okay, great. So yeah, they do tend to ask questions. They tend to seem motivated about what's going on. I love the glowing face. You can tell quite a few things. So absolutely. I think this all goes to say, even if we don't have the exact language, we do have a sense of when they're with us and when they're not with us, right? And we can tell when it is and what the difference is. Okay, so is it engagement? So what is student engagement? I wanted to know about student engagement because I caught wind of this term at some point and thought, that's it. That's what's going on. They're engaged or not engaged, and there is a difference, and they learn differently and function differently, and my life is better when they are. So let me try to figure this out. So I looked around and I found a few things. One of the things I found is we really don't know what student engagement is. Like I said, we know it when we see it, but there's not a huge consensus around what that term is. And I know this is a quote from 2005, but in 2025, we still don't have a super great consensus about what engagement means or why it is important. We're getting there. We have a better sense of why it's important, but we still don't 100% know how to pin it down. It is a little bit of a fuzzy term and means different things to different people. As Swanner said, rather than being concretely defined in the literature, the concept of engaged learning emerges from multiple frameworks and educational practices. And I think that's where we get into some things. I think some of us think about it in different ways. I remember a conversation I had with my co-author and colleague, and she was arguing that it was emotional, and I was like, absolutely not. It is cognitive. Student engagement is cognitive. And she said, no, it is absolutely not. It is affective. And so that's actually how we kind of came to our model, that it is, in fact, both of those things. But we can talk about student engagement even among people who study this stuff and mean different things by it. So that makes it a little tricky to pin down. What is it? That's a good question. So I have my own definition. You may have a different one, but my definition is that student engagement is the mental state a student is in while learning. It is the intersection between thinking and feeling. And like I said, I had to come around to this, but it does involve both, I believe now, thinking and feeling. Students need to be willing to learn the feeling part of it, and they need to invest the intellectual effort to learn the thinking part of it. So when student engagement does occur, it affects learning behaviors and thus has an effect on the learning outcomes. So what kind of effect, or probably relationship is a better term than effect, because we don't have a lot of uh, robust randomized controlled trials. We have a lot of experimental, quasi-experimental designs, relational studies, correlational studies, qualitative studies, and some of those things. And what we find is that positive correlations between student engagement and their enjoyment and satisfaction exist. So if they're engaged, they're happier. Shockingly, if they're engaged and they're happier, they also achieve at higher levels. They have better learning outcomes. And if they are engaged, they tend to have better persistence. They'll stay in your course longer, and retention, so they'll probably come back again next semester. So it is a big deal. Student engagement matters, which leads us to the question of how we can promote it. That brings us to the conceptual framework that my colleague and I developed of student engagement, and that it is a combination of motivation and active learning. So the feeling side and the thinking side. But that's what students do, right? They're motivated and they're the ones who do the active learning. They're the ones who do the thinking, right? Well, yes, but as instructors, we promote it. The things that we put into place are the things that can help motivate students and can help ensure that they get to those higher levels of active learning. And that's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to tell you about my model for student engagement, break it down into more essential parts about things that we can actually do to help promote motivation and active learning. But before I do that, I would like to stop and take questions. So if you have questions for me, I would like to ask you to post them into the chat. And I will wait about 15 seconds. They say wait time is about 7 seconds, but since you're typing, we'll go faster. Do y'all know wait time? Let's see, I don't have any way to see if you respond to me or not. I don't see the little icon-y things. Okay, well, since I don't know if you know wait time, I will tell you about wait time while you're typing your question, if you have one. So wait time is a notion that Mary Budd Rowe investigated, and she found that when an instructor asks a question, that instructor usually waits an average of 2 to 3 seconds before calling on a student to respond. And that student is usually the same student. That student is the student in the first row who has their hand up instantly. So you tend to go to that person over and over again. But Mary Buds found out that if you waited for 7 or 9 or even 12 seconds before calling on students, that more people would raise their hands and more people would respond. So that's my spiel on wait time. I don't see a question, so I will continue on then.
There
Okay.
are a couple questions, Claire.
Oh,
Um,
are there? I'm not seeing them. Oh, wait. Okay.
yeah,
Great. Thank
David's,
you.
do you see it? David said, could we say that engagement is a state of flow then?
I think flow is a great way to think about it. I have written about flow before and the engagement. I'm trying to think if I think they're exactly the same. I think they're certainly related. I'm thinking maybe engagement can help get you to flow. is how maybe I think about it. But you've got to have the motivation to do it. You've got to do the active engagement. And when those combine, maybe you get there to flow. But that is a fabulous question. So thank you. I may change my answer when I think about it later, but I think that's how I think about it right this second.
And
Thank
then
you.
one more question.
Okay.
Let's see here. Mama Dual said, I wonder if they are generalizable without the studies, without considering some impacting factors such as the level of the course, class time, class size, and requirements, and so on.
So that's a great question. And I would say with educational research, not a ton of it is what I would call generalizable. There is some, but when you think about it, educational research studies, and I think there's some great work out there, and I think they have found some great stuff. But a lot of times they're limited to a single institution. A lot of times the instructor may even be doing the research. It's a small N. We don't often have the luxury of, having a real control group and a real experimental group with the intervention. So a lot of times, I think what you get is more what I would call transferable research, in that if a study is well done, you can read it and read what was done and make decisions for yourself about whether that could potentially work for your class. And I think that's what we have to do. For example, if I read a study about problem-based learning and engineering, I'm in education. Oh, and maybe it's at Harvard or something. I'm in education at the University of Alabama. Would it be generalized, or would it be applicable to my course? It wouldn't be generalizable, but would it be applicable? And I think I'd have to look a lot at what they were actually doing and how they did the study and what the class size was and what the goal was and some of those things to make a determination about whether it was right for me. I will say the research on student engagement has been done on multiple disciplines, multiple different classes over time, and it's pretty consistent that student engagement leads to a lot of positive um, yeah, effects, a lot of positive outcomes. So is it generalizable? I mean, student engagement, yes, I would say probably it's going to help your class to be engaged. Whether one specific thing that can lead to student engagement will help in your class, I think you would have to make the determination. So, for example, if I say, one class found poster presentations led to high levels of student engagement and higher levels of outcome, would that help in your class? If you're teaching theater, maybe not a scientific poster, but if you're teaching engineering or education or some kind of social science, maybe. So it's a great question, but I think the bottom line is you have to make rational or judgment calls about what will work in your classes. Okay. I think that's it. So I'm going to move along to talk about the conceptual framework. So the first one we're going to talk about, the first side of the framework we're going to talk about is motivation. All right, motivation is a positive attitude toward completing the task, which is characterized by enthusiasm, willingness, and dedication. And man, I wish my students had that all the time, right? I wish I had that all the time. So that's not a comment on them. That is a really high bar to cross, but there are levels of motivation. But what we do know is that they need to feel like they want to do it. So what does that even mean? There are a few different models of motivation that I think can help us think about it. One is the behaviorist model, right? And that's where a series of positive and negative reinforcements lead to the desired behavior, right? If you press the lever, you get the food and you move on with your life, and that's a great thing. But when you do that, and a lot of our educational system is based on behaviorist principles, Students can lose focus on learning. They're so invested in either getting the carrot or avoiding the stick that it can actually hurt with motivation because it's just so focused on what they have to do. There's also the needs model of motivation, and that's Maslow's hierarchies that I know you've heard of. Maybe you haven't, but you probably have. Um, and there is some criticism of Maslow, but I think it does tell us some interesting things about motivation. And that is, you have to fulfill some of those basic needs first before you can get to things like motivation for learning, right? You have to have food, warmth, safety, security, good friends, good relationships with people before you can get on up into those higher order things. The challenge is that sometimes students really are at those basic levels. You know, there have been a lot of studies recently looking at food insecurity, and a shockingly high number of students are food insecure. And if they're hungry or they're tired because they had to work late, or they're having some kind of relationship issue, or their family is sick, a family member is sick, it is really hard to get past that, right? So, but it's a good model to keep in mind because it helps us understand. A model that I like for thinking about motivation when it comes to student engagement is the two factors model. And that suggests that two concepts, value and expectancy, leads to motivation. So the first factor here, value, it's important for students to value what they're learning. And in my case, they didn't always do that, right? Sometimes they valued the reading, but a lot of times they felt they didn't need my course, and had been put there unfairly, and that they were never going to use it. And it's hard to get past that. I mean, you have to figure out ways, right? And that's the question. How do you figure out ways to get around that? They also have to value how they are learning. Some people love a lecture, some people don't. Some people love group work, not many, but some people do. So you have to figure out how to help them value. So what's important to you? You've got to help them figure out how to value what and how they're learning. So the next factor is expectancy. Expectancy is the likelihood of success, their perception of the likelihood of success. They have to believe that their effort is going to lead to increased performance, and that their performance will lead to rewards, and that the rewards will satisfy their individual needs. Excuse me. All right. I'm going to mute my audio and cough for just a second. So, pardon me. Okay, I hope that got it. Thank you for your patience. Okay, so what can we do? A couple of motivating strategies for us. Those can relate to subject, process, and outcomes. So subject, making the subject personal and relevant can go a long way. So we're going to do a quick demonstration. I'm going to ask you to take just a second to create a numbered list, 1 to 20. So please do that now. Write down numbers 1 through 20. Okay, I hope you got that. Next, I'm going to read a set of words to you. I would like you to write yes or no in response to your prompt. So don't write down the word, simply write yes or no. Here are your prompts. If your last name starts with A to K, write yes if the word has the letter E in it, and no if it does not. If your name starts with L through Z, write yes if the word sounds pleasant to you, and no if the word does not sound pleasant to you. Okay, so here we go. Does anyone have any questions before we get started? Before I tell you the words? Okay, I am going to read your word list. So again, A through K is yes for the letter E, L through Z, yes if it sounds pleasant. Don't write the words. Number 1 is table. Number 2 is night. Number 3 is red. Number 4 is love. Number 5 is salt. Number 6 is happy. Number 7 is north. Number 8 is mother. Number 9 is high. Number 10 is odd. Number 11 is hate. Number 12 is father. Number 13 is day. Number 14 is green. Number 15 is even. Number 16 is chair. Number 17 is pepper. Number 18 is low. Number 19 is sad. And number 20 is south. Okay. Now, write down on your paper as many of the words as you can remember. And I'm going to give you, I don't know, 1 minute for that. Okay. So, how many words did you remember? Here is the word list. And we're going to do the waterfall again. I would like you to type in the number that you got right. We'll do group 1, the letter E people first. So letter E's, report in. Group 1, report in. Okay, group, okay. We're still getting some group 1. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, group 2 now. Please report in. Okay. So what difference do you see? Can someone type to me? What do you see? Group 2 remembered way more. Yes. So higher number of connections with emotional things. Yes. Uh, the first group, absolutely. They had to think about how they felt about it. They had to think about assign a value to it. Group 1 was very surface level, right? It was E. Does it have an E? The other one is a much deeper kind of association. So the notion is you've got to figure out, it's the same word list, right? but we did the same exercise for two different groups. So how do we make sure that we're being group two in our teaching? How do we figure out how to make those kind of connections with students? And I think there are a lot of different ways. But I think if you can figure out how to make it connect with something personal or, something relevant to today, it's going to be a lot more meaningful and memorable and get in there and stick with them a little bit more than if it's just the letter E, right? So a contemporary issues journal, for example, is just one way to do that. The goal is the same, but this is just one example. If you have them write about how the class topic is somehow related to something in the future, that can help it stick better, right? Than if they're just trying to memorize the subject. If you do a digital story, and I personally love these, it's where students, and I do them at the first of class, right? So I'll say something like, okay, we're going to be talking about intro to the field of higher education. I want you to talk about your journey and how you came here, and then write a digital story about it. And it's a video, and man, the projects students have created have been just amazing. I mean, one of them did this kind of stop motion thing one time, and one had this lighting that they panned out, and they really, really got into it, and it made them really think about how it was important to them. So I'm not saying do these, but I'm saying think about activities that can help your students make those connections to their personal experiences, their personal feelings, the real world, things that matter to them today. Okay, another option is creating tasks that involve community, connection, and collaboration. And some things like good old think, pair, share, where, even if you're teaching a large lecture class, if you can take a couple of minutes out of class and ask them a question to think about it, turn to a partner and share with each other, that's going to help them remember more than if you just keep talking for a full 50 minutes. The research is very, very clear that that moment of connection can really change their learning. Another thing is when you have them do something like a group case study where they work together to solve a problem that involves real people in the real world, that can be more meaningful. And then finally, creating tasks that result in meaningful outcomes and products. I find this for my students to be one of the major motivating factors for them. They're all doc students. They're not really interested in a multiple choice test. They are interested, whether they need it or not, that's a different issue, but they are interested in creating professional products that they can use. And I mentioned a poster presentation before. And I think I've got a slide on that. I got ahead of myself. But one thing I've had them do in the past is create a class book where everybody writes a chapter of the book, but they have to coordinate with each other to come up with the central concept of the book, and then to make sure that the chapters are all connected to each other. And back in the day when I used to do this, they would come up with these really large products, and they were so proud of these products. A lot of times now they go with the CDs, and it's a little less heft, but they are very proud of this professional looking product because they can put together very professional looking ebooks, and it's something that they can take with them from the course as well. Another thing that I have my students do is a personal learning environment, and that's where they create a concept map of things that they can use, or resources they can use to learn about the course content after the course. So it might be people, it might be articles or journals that they can turn to, it might be conferences, it might be social media accounts they can follow, but it's ways that they can continue learning about the course. And so this helps them understand that it's beyond this single course and that it can carry with them from henceforward, right? Okay, so we just did motivation, and this part we're going to start talking about active learning. So in addition to feeling like they want to learn, students do need to invest the intellectual effort to actually learn. Oh, there we go. So, intellectual effort, it means the procedures of instruction. It's interacting with the content in a deep and thoughtful manner. I want them to really get in and think about it and not just let the information wash over them. So, I'd like to do a quick pulse check. I would like you to respond into the chat and say how you define active learning. We'll take just 10 seconds. You can go ahead and start typing. We won't waterfall this time. So as soon as you have a definition of active learning, please post it. All right. Wonderment project sounds fabulous. Okay, Amy, practice using information presented. David, anything other than teacher talks, students listen? Maybe. I might have thoughts about that. Stacy, students are interactive with the content or others. Engaging students in a way they have to process information. Brain and heart are engaged. Students ask questions. These are great. Human intelligence, engaging with information, making it their own, connecting with other students. All those are absolutely wonderful. Okay, I'm going to give you my definition. It's the level of cognitive effort or intellectual effort that students put into their learning. And here's my, short thing. Well, I'll save this. I think active learning techniques are different, and I think y'all are a super savvy group because no one said think, pair, share. And a lot of times when I say to a group, what's active learning, they'll say, think, pair, share, or jigsaw, or something like that. But I think of it as the activities teachers use to help students engage in active learning. So active learning techniques can help students get to active learning, which is that higher level of cognitive engagement. And are some activities better than others? Let's do a quick check. How many of you say yes, some of them are better than others, and how many say no? Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Yeah, maybe. Maybe I can change your minds on that. Let me try. Uh, I think that's good. Right. It is contextual, as some of you pointed out. But what makes me crazy is stuff like this. I don't know if you've seen the cone of learning before, but it is the notion that some activities will help you learn better than others. So I'm going to remember 10% of what I read, 20% of what I hear, blah, 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 90% of what I say and do. Well, that is bogus. So this cone of learning, there is absolutely no data behind this to back it up. Mr. Dale put this out in 1969 and it has been floating around since. Somebody may have shown it to you in the past, but it doesn't even make sense if you think about it. I mean, I remember a lot more than 10% of what I read. I don't quite remember what I had for breakfast this morning, right? So I don't know that these things are, well, they're not real. There's no data to suggest it, but it is getting at something, right? It is getting at some of them may prompt you to be more active than others do. And I think that's where, as teachers, we have to pick up a little bit. So my take is that students can be more or less mentally active in any activity that we ask them to complete. So, for example, a lot of people say you're going to be really active in problem solving. I've already mentioned I was an English major, English master's, taught English. Um, I'm a qualitative researcher, math, I don't have a lot of exposure to it. I'm not bad in it. It's just not where I spent most of my time. So you would assume that I would like reading or listening more than problem solving, and that I'd be more engaged. But I don't know that that's true, because I really don't have to engage in problem solving the same way, right? If I look at x plus 3 equals 5, you would assume, as an English major, that I would have to be really active in that. But I'm not. I know the answer's 2, right? Without any kind of effort at all, right? But if I'm listening to something, I may be very engaged. Like if I listen to that, I have a dream speech, that may really get me up to those higher levels of thinking that x plus 3 equals 5 does not get me to. I'm going to personally be more active in thinking about this I have a dream speech than in others. Now, maybe some other people would be the other way, but what I'm saying is I don't think it's task dependent. What I think is that we can be low or high on our effort of active learning or mental effort, intellectual engagement on whatever the task is. So for problem solving, x plus 3 equals 5, that's a pretty low level of engagement for me. I've solved the problem, it's 2. But if I were to think about it a little more and say, well, that's a algebra problem and the answer is 2 because I'm solving for x, then I'm trying to get a little bit higher up. I'm being a little more engaged. But if I get all the way up and say, you know what? I took a second, it took me a beat to get to the answer of 2 on this algebra problem, whereas solving for x, I really need to go learn about my math facts a little bit more and practice that so I can get to those higher order skills. Then I'm moving up the level on mental effort, right? The same thing goes with listening. I can just listen to a lecture for facts and information, which is what a lot of students are doing if we're lucky at this point, right? They're just listening to the facts and information because they're not great at being good participants in a lecture. They don't know how to think about how to maintain concerted attention and try to understand the message that you're sending and try to ask questions. They certainly don't often get to those higher levels where they're thinking, wow, this is a really great speech, or let me think about that. Do I even agree with what the speaker is saying? Or, hey, I've drifted and I need to pull myself back in. They're not able to do that because they haven't necessarily been trained how to do that. And so they're going to be at those lower levels of activity. So questions may or problems may prompt you a little bit more, but you can be pretty low level or high level of active learning in whatever task it is you're asking students to do. So I think one thing we can think about is what the specific task we're asking students to do is, and what that looks like at a low, moderate, or high level of engagement, mental activity, and what we can do to prompt those higher levels, right? So I love this quote. It's from Pat Cross of the Cross Academy. Passive learning is an oxymoron. There is no such thing. If you have learned, you have been active. Your brain has done something. It has taken something from short-term memory and put it into long-term memory and stored it there, and you can retrieve it later. You have been active. So it doesn't matter if you're in a lecture or solving a problem or out on a site visit or whatever you're doing, it is students can be lower or high levels of efforts. So active learning techniques can get us to active learning. I already showed you that slide. Okay, that's great, Major, but what can we do? I think there are a few good places to use active learning techniques in our teaching. Preparation, focus, and reflection. So I think one thing we can do is think about how to ensure that students are ready for what it is we're bringing to the table, right? I'm going to ask you to read now. I'm going to show you a paragraph. It's actually 2 pages. So if you could, when you finish the first page, just write done in the chat for me. That would be great. When I see, I don't know, 20 or so, I won't count, but when I see a lot of dones, I will switch to the next thing. So I want you to read this paragraph. When you're finished with this screen, before I go to the next screen, it's 2 paragraphs, 2-screen paragraph, say done. Okay, here we go. Read, write done when you're finished. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of done, so I'm going to ask you if you know what this is talking about. Do the chat. Tell me what the subject of the paragraph is. There we go, right on the first one. It's about laundry, washing clothes, right? So, how did you feel when you read it? I'm gonna guess it was cranky. That's how I felt. Um, but I'm gonna point out that uh, Bransford did an experiment with this where he put people into three groups. Some people never got the topic, some people got the topic before, and some people got the topic after. And then he tested for comprehension and the percentage of idea units recalled. What do you see in these two? What do you see in the data? Do you notice any trends at all? Those who knew the topic before recalled more info. Yeah, better recall when you knew the topic and before. Yes, absolutely. Knowing the topic before was clearly better. But look at topic after and no topic, right? It's almost better to have the top. Well, there's not much statistically different here, but it's almost better to never know than to getting the topic after. And I think what we have to take from this is it's really important to help students understand what we're talking about, to have them think about, bring up their schemata, their existing knowledge of a topic, and think, okay, this is what we're doing. So a couple of techniques for that are update your classmate. And this is one I use where I'll come into a class and say, hey, Sarah was absent last week. Sarah is a fictional student. Tell Sarah what she missed and why it's important. You don't have to make it up. It could just be write down what we covered last week and why that's going to be important for this week. It's priming the pump. It's asking them to bring up existing knowledge that not from a long time ago, no misconceptions, but just last week, and it'll help you diagnose if there are any misconceptions. Another one is a quick write where you say, oh, tell me what student engagement is. What two factors does it have, right? And then you just do that a minute writing before you start talking. Again, it's priming the pump. So, help students' attention and focus is another way to help engagement or active learning. One thing you can do is when you're lecturing, stop and ask students to translate what you just said. This helps them really focus on meaning, and it's another way to get a quick bit of information about whether they're following along and understanding what you're saying. Another one I like to do is analytic teams. That's where you divide up roles and ask students to take on different roles, like whether they ask questions, they critique it, they agree with it, and that teaches them that there are different jobs to do. A last one is incorporating metacognition and reflection. A couple of activities to do are like a 3-2-1. What's three things you learned, two things you still are unsure about, and one thing you want the teacher to address. You can make up whatever terms for the 3-2-1 you want. Another one is a lecture engagement log where you ask them to talk about how much they prepped ahead of time for class and how much they got ready for it. Okay, we're going to skip the questions and I'm going to go straight to the summary because I have 1 minute left and I'm going to bring it home. So, what is student engagement? It's the mental state a student is in while learning. It requires both thinking and feeling. It's important because it's going to help with satisfaction, learning, persistent, and retention. We can promote it in a lot of ways by strategies that promote motivation and active learning. Okay, so to close with a quote, it is noble to teach oneself, but still nobler to teach others. So thanks for your time and your attention and your hard work today. I am absolutely happy to send you a copy of my slides. So if Stacy will remind me to do that after this, I will be happy to do so. So thanks for coming and for your attention. You have been very engaged and participative, and I so appreciate that. Thank you.